If there is a form of media that has evolved more since its creation, it would be video games. In the 50 years following the creation of video games have evolved at an accelerated rate. If you were to tell a child in the 70s that games like this would become this, their minds would probably do something like this. However, it is not just the graphics that have changed since the creation of video games.
With improvements in computer science, gamers are now more connected than ever before, and anyone with basic technological knowledge can create the next big game, even without the backing of a multi-million-dollar business.
So, let's begin with the first video game ever made, Pong. Released in 1972, this arcade cabinet was... Oh, hold on. Yeah? Uh-huh. What? Oh, got it. So that was my editor, and she just told me that Pong was actually not the first video game ever created.
The first video games were actually being created by computer scientists who were developing computer hardware and software for the first computers ever developed in years as early as the 1950s. Scientists would program the computers to play games of chess and checkers against themselves as a way to try new programming and, obviously, have a little bit of fun. Granted, at this time, having access to this kind of technology was extremely expensive, meaning it was extremely unlikely that common consumers would see any of these games. It wasn't until Pong paved the way with its arcade cabinets that actual video games that we know today would be available to the public.
Between 1972 and the early 1990s, the first video game communities could be found in local arcades, as at the time, home consoles such as the Magadov Odyssey would only offer a limited amount of games that weren't up to par with arcade graphics. Arcade cabinets were the strongest piece of technology for video game play at the time, but obviously were not the most convenient thing to have around the house. By the 1980s, home consoles such as the NES and the Sega Genesis were showcasing graphics and an array of titles just as good, if not better, than most arcade games, which piqued players' interest in the direction of console gaming. During the 1990s, arcades were quickly being forgotten since the public preferred to enjoy games from the comfort of their home. The 1980s and the 2000s marked the era of the console wars. This was when companies such as Nintendo, Sony, Atari, Sega, and Microsoft would heavily compete year after year for the title of Best Console. They would all get ahead of the game, pun intended, by embracing new technology. Sony was the first to introduce CD games with the 1994 PlayStation, which made games cheaper, and in 2000, they introduced the PS2, which would also work as a DVD player. In 2006, Nintendo further revolutionized the gaming industry by releasing the Wii, a console with handheld motion controls that completely changed the gaming experience. Microsoft tried to catch up by releasing the Kinect in 2010, which used hand gestures and body movements for the gameplay. While huge advancements in hardware were made for video game consoles as gaming companies strived to have the strongest console, there was still one major aspect of gaming that was being left behind. After mainstream gaming left the arcades, gamers became less connected. While gaming was now more convenient for gamers, they were also now very disconnected from the people who shared similar interests in the hobby, and most importantly, the businesses who were in charge of the video game industry. This was before the internet was implemented into the consoles. It wouldn't be until 2001 that consoles would be capable of online interaction. The revolution of the internet did more than simply bring gamers together. It also established a better connection with the people who make their video games. With the introduction of the internet, the gamers can now easily let the developers know their opinion on a game technology. This has influenced the game development process by allowing creators to test their games on a larger scale and directly ask the gamers their opinions on how games are shaping up to be. This connection does not solely affect the game development process. It has also had an effect on many companies' business models. The best example of this would be the reveal of the Xbox One, and the community backlash against the initial product. Originally, Microsoft planned for the Xbox to require an internet connection to do anything on the system. including the main function of playing video games. Along with that, there were also plans for the denial of a sharing of hard copies of games, meaning once a game was downloaded onto one system, it would not be able to be played on any other system at all. This caused massive amounts of criticism from the gaming community, which resulted in the surprising move of Microsoft completely changing their original plans for the Xbox One. This was a huge event in the history of video games, as it demonstrated just how much consumers affected the producers in this industry. The internet has also created other ways for gamers to enjoy games, if they do not want to support large companies.
Hey, you!
Who, me?
Yeah, you! Are you tired of playing the same games year in and year out?
What's going on?
Are you tired of the same Call of Duties, Assassin's Creed, and every EA sport game that comes out every year and are basically the same thing with slightly better graphics?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, worry no more, for I have just the thing for you. Introducing indie games.
What are those?
What are those? Well, indie games are an alternative to the same games every year. They are made by independent game studios who are free to do anything that they want when creating their games, allowing for full reign of control in the creative process.
Wait, so they're not made by multi-million-dollar gaming studios?
No, majority of games are made by fellow gamers who just want to express their love for games by making a great game.
But professionals are not making them?
No, but that does not mean that they are bad. In fact, many recent indie games have been critically praised, even receiving higher scores than most AAA games.
I still don't like it. Give me a good reason why I should play indie games.
They're cheap.
Indie is the term used to refer to games that weren't developed by official video game studios, but instead were created by independent developers. Since video games started to gain popularity in the 70s and 80s, game lovers have always wanted to create their own. But it wasn't until the 1990s, where computers were becoming a household item, that independent developers finally had a chance. Yes, there were several indie games, such as Doom, that were released through shareware, but they were still being made by professional game developers. The only difference between them and big corporations was that they didn't have $1 million budget. By the 1990s, online game distribution companies such as GameSpy were available. They provided a service in which rookie and professional game developers alike could showcase their games with the rest of the community. But at the time, the internet wasn't fast enough nor had enough of an audience for GameSpy games to actually thrive. Various online game distribution companies have been created ever since, but the most popular, by far, is Valve's Steam. Valve, a popular game publisher and developer, launched Steam in 2003. Although it wasn't warmly welcomed by the gaming community, it has now evolved to become the favorite online game distributor of many gamers around the world. The reason behind its popularity is how interactive the relationship between Steam and its customers is. They provide a service called Game Maker Studio, where anyone can create their own game, as well as Greenlight, a place where people submit games and everyone in the community votes for which one should be sold on Steam. In the last few years, two of the biggest games in the industry have been indie games. Five Nights at Freddy's, created by Scott Cawthon, scared everyone out of their seats when he released the indie horror game in August of 2014. It was a simple point-and-click game set on a Chuck E. Cheese-like children's restaurant, but the mystery and the jump scares intrigued players enough for him to release 3 more successful games and to sign a movie adaptation deal. Another major success has been the beloved Undertale, released by Toby Fox in September 2015. This role-playing video game was crowdfunded on Kickstarter, and it surpassed its $5,000 goal by $45,000. Since then, it has sold over 1 million digital copies and is known to be one of the best video games of 2015. Video games were first created by computer scientists who were simply trying to have a bit of fun, and as soon as they were introduced to the public, everyone enjoyed them and demanded more.
Since then, the video game market has been huge, and game developers have been using the constant evolution of technology to come out with new and innovative games.
Although games started out as a social practice in arcade parlors, the introduction of home consoles isolated gamers back into their homes. Currently, with the use of the internet, gamers can now be connected not only with each other, but with gaming companies themselves. They can ask for what they want to see next, and many of the times, gaming studios do deliver.
Not to mention, nowadays, everyone can create a game, and indie developers can thrive without the need of a company backing. With online distributors such as Steam, game makers can easily sell their work, and gamers can obtain them from a fraction of the cost of a AAA game. Because of this, many of the most popular games in the last few years have been indie games.
Everyone should expect great things for the future of video games as technology progresses, because they are simply going to become more entertaining. Cut. Okay, wanna play some video games?
Sure.
Did you just carry that around with you?
Of course.